All right, let's get on to running back Zack Moss at Tennessee. You like him at RB7. The experts actually have him all the way down at 14. Why the love for Zack Moss here?
I mean, well, JT is out, and we've seen what this ends up meaning. 98%, 76%, 81%, and 80% of the snaps in the games without JT. And how did Zack Moss do in those? 21, 23, 7, and 34 points. One kind of dud. The rest of them were absolute smashes. All three of those other games were top 10 performances, including against Tennessee, who he's facing this week. 34 points, the running back 2 that week. He was second in rushing through those first 6 weeks. The running back 3 in fantasy in that span. He's actually still top 10 in both metrics, despite taking a back seat to JT for the last, better part of the last 3 weeks. So I really think he is an absolute must play anytime JT is out of the lineup, and probably you're starting him anyways. But I've gotten some questions about Zack Moss, and there's no reason to question him at all. This is a absolute must play. He's also only 4,600 on draft, because I know everybody already knows that, but you can't. That's chalk you just have to eat. He is going to absolutely go off, as he always does, without Taylor in the lineup.
David Montgomery, you've got him all the way up at 12. The experts have him at 18. To me, the 18 rank is just a little bit nuts. 12 might even be low. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't feel like he's had any bad games that he's played.
No, other than week 6 when he got injured. Other than that, he's had 12 or more points in every game. He's been a top 18 running back in every game, and 4 of his 7 games have been in the top 10. I mean, he is as lock of a bona fide running back too, with very more often than not top 10 upside. And I get Gibbs. Yeah, his role is increased and he's gotten some goal line involvement now. So it's not the clear cut Jamal Williams role anymore, but they love David Montgomery. And against the Saints here, they've been much more limiting. They're not, I think a lot of people have this fear of the Saints because for many years they were a defense that you did not want to put your running backs up against. And they're just not there right now. They're right in the middle of the pack. And they are limiting to receiving backs, to pass catching metrics for running backs, but they've actually given up the 11th most rushing yards to backs. They're giving up a touchdown every other game. I think David Montgomery is right into that at minimum touchdown, potential 2-touchdown ceiling here, and I'm riding it. I'm absolutely letting it rip this week. I don't know how he is not consistently ranked as a top 12 running back given the track record this year.
Yeah, I mean, you said he has a solid RB2. I mean, to me, he's an RB1 until further notice. Maybe Robinson, maybe Gibbs is too. I mean, because Gibbs is getting more and more involved, but it hasn't hurt Montgomery's production. I mean, the guy's putting up 17, 18 points a game. I mean, you can set your watch to it. Like, it happens every single week. So I don't know how you could have him that low until we see at least one off game, which we haven't.
Right.
So lower, Austin Ekeler. The experts have him all the way up at 5, running back 5. You got him all the way down at 13. What is it that you don't like that you're seeing from this guy? I think I know.
I mean, it pains me. As somebody who has him in nearly every league, it looked like he was getting the season back on track, 3 straight games at 20 points, and then you just watch him in these last 2 weeks. If you have eyeballs, it is so noticeable how lacking in explosiveness he is these last few weeks, and whether it's an injury, whether age is catching up. I'm guessing it's injury related. I don't think he's just toast at this point of his career, but there's some runs where he just is not hitting the corner. There's receptions where he normally would be upfield by the time the defenders would even know where he's at, and he is just getting swarmed. He's not pounding it in at the goal line right now. There's something he is dealing with, no doubt in my mind, and it is sapping him 6 and 7 fantasy points in his last 2 games, running back 32 and running back 36, despite 30, 80%, 71% of the snaps he's seeing as healthy of a workload as he ever has. He's just not the same old Ekeler. And sure, I get that you probably can't bench him, certainly in a week with so many buys, especially if Keenan Allen's out, then maybe we could bump him up here with a target share and all that stuff. But he's ranked right now ahead of Kyren Williams, who is just a bona fide lock for 20 points nearly every single week. I just don't understand that at all. I think Austin Ekeler, we're talking, shallower 10-team leagues, but you have the depth to potentially bench him. You got to at least consider it at this point until we see him regain that explosiveness, if we see him regain it.
If. Breece Hall going against Atlanta. You like him at 21, 6 spots below the experts. I mean, he was doing great for a while, but it seems like those days are a long time ago now.
Yeah, and I've actually bumped him down since making this list. He's at my running back 24, 9 spots below the ECR. He had those 3 straight 20-plus PPR days, weeks 5, 6. They had a 7 bye, and then 8. It looked like Breece Hall's back. We can really sustain some fantasy production despite the awful quarterback play, but no. Line injuries, Zach Wilson regressed, and now since then, 8, 9, 16, and 8 the half PPR points, running back 27, 30, 13, and 30. So, yeah, he had that one running back 13 day where he broke that touchdown in the receiving game against Buffalo. It is just the worst. PFF's worst graded blocking line. Tim Boyle may be the only quarterback worse than Zach Wilson in the NFL. I mean, what a disaster that was against Miami. And then you mix in the fact that Atlanta is actually giving up the second fewest points to running backs. They have not allowed a single rushing touchdown all year. I just think it's yet another long day. Maybe you get to 8 to 9 points where he breaks a couple decent plays and gets you an okay total. But I would rather start Brian Robinson. There's a bunch of guys I have well above Breece Hall. I'd rather start Zach Charbonnet tonight, for example. I just have no interest in having any piece of this offense if I don't have to. As good as Breece Hall is, the line, the quarterback play, it's too much to overcome right now, and I don't want to keep expecting him to. It's certainly not in a matchup as difficult as this one.
All right, Hail Mary is not a great crop. No, Jeff Wilson, 16% owned. I have to think you'd like him a lot more if Achane was like going to be out.
Oh, I'd love him. I think he would actually be like a top 30-ish. He'd be honestly close to Breece Hall in my rankings if we knew Achane was going to be out, which sounds so absurd. I know that. But we saw last week with no Achane, 14 touches, 73 yards of offense, looking as solid as ever. Wilson, guy that was a top 10 running back, is the lead starter when he first arrived to Miami. And if there's no Achane, and even if there is Achane, I still think there's a chance that this game is such a blowout that Tua, Tyreek, they all go off so big early. I mean, I'm talking like the Broncos style game earlier this season that we were even seeing Chris Brooks and those guys, the third stringers, get a lot of late burn and do damage with it. I could see that happening for Jeff Wilson. Now, of course, if Achane's out and he's the number 2 guy, I love him. I think he's a definite play. But even if he's in there, I could see the game getting so far out of hand that Wilson could get the late burn, could just find himself falling in the end zone regardless. So I think plus I always like with these Hail Marys, if you have to start someone, at least have somebody that has a little upside should something happen. Should Mostert suffer an injury? Should Achane, again, we've seen the injury imp nibble those guys, certainly Achane all year, but Mostert throughout his career, there's a real chance that Jeff Wilson could be making some starts in the future. So if you're desperate enough to have a Hail Mary, why not make it someone that has some long-term upside if the narrative ends up playing out for him? So that's what I like about Jeff Wilson and the next guy we're going to talk about.
Well, we talked about how you were going to discuss DErnest Johnson later. Now is that time. He's only 8% owned, so we know Etienne may be a little banged up. So give me the quick sales pitch.
We've seen 25% or higher rushing share in 3 straight games. I've always liked DErnest Johnson. Anytime I've had to start him, he's come through huge for me. And I don't think he's going to necessarily do much if Etienne is in, but has a chest injury. Maybe against a banged-up Bengals team with Jake Browning, they're not going to necessarily need Etienne to just blow this team out of the water, in my opinion, at home especially. So this could be a good chance where we might even see that 25% rush share bump up to 50%. And we've seen every time DErnest gets used, he looks good. A 40-yard reception last week. I just like the player a lot. I think the workload might get a little bit of a bump if Etienne is entering this game as banged up as it seems he is. And again, similar to Jeff Wilson, should something happen to Etienne during this game, you just got the handcuff already on your roster. But a little bit of upside there to your handcuff stash, in my opinion. What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.